We all have had a time when we've had to be inspiring impromptu to people that we care about. Whether we've had family members that have passed away and we've had to be comforting in those times, whether we've had friends that have had relationships that have ended and we've had to be comforting in those times, we have all engaged in specific instances where we have to be an aid to others. And today, I'm going to be speaking about Knute Rockne and his speech to the Notre Dame football team at halftime of the 1928 Notre Dame versus Army game. I will be speaking on the background of Knute Rockne, the setting of his speech, and the purpose of his speech. According to History.com, Knute Rockne was born in Norway in 1888. Sounds a little bit interesting for a football coach to be born in Europe. He moved to Chicago whenever he was 5 years old with his family, and anybody that lives in Chicago is a Notre Dame fan. So instantly became a Notre Dame fan, fell in love with the university. His family grew up loving the traditions, and they were also Catholic, so that helped with liking them. Like I said, he grew up a Notre Dame fan and ended up applying to Notre Dame and going to the University of Notre Dame, and he played football as well as track and field. Was the captain of the football team in 1913 and led them to 9 victories that season. After 2 seasons after he graduated, there was a plane crash and the entire Notre Dame team and coaching staff all passed away. And in 1917, as Notre Dame was searching for a new head coach, Knute Rockne's name came to the forefront. And Knute Rockne would then become the head coach in 1917 of the Notre Dame men's football team, and would continue to coach until 1931 when he also would die in a plane crash. He's known as the winningest head coach in college or professional history with a record of 105, 12, and 5. Now that I've told you a little bit about Knute Rockne's life and his background, I'm going to tell you about the setting of the speech and why it was relevant to that time. It was halftime of 1928, and Knute Rockne's work was cut out for him. As I've already said, his record spoke for himself, and he was a very proficient coach. But this was on the cusp of Knute Rockne's worst season. He was barely over 500, and they were losing to their arch rival at the end of the season, Army. Rockne had become an innovator for football, but now it was the time to inspire his team, which had previously not really needed inspiration. They were all down. They were in a hard defensive battle. We're losing 6-0 at halftime and needed it to come from somewhere because the players were not speaking amongst themselves. And now that I've told you about the setting of the speech, I'm going to tell you about the purpose of the speech. This speech is titled "Win One for the Gipper," and up front that doesn't really sound like it makes very much sense, or it sounds like it could be a slang term for a friend, but Gipper was actually a reference to George Gipp, who played on the football team with Knute Rockne back in 1913. And Knute quotes Gipp in the speech saying, and this is a quote from Gipp that Knute is saying to his team, "Rock, sometime when the team is up against it and the brakes are beating the bows, tell the boys to go out there and win one for the Gipper." And George, in this instance, was referring to Knute. He said, "Whenever you need inspiration, use me. Tell them to go out there and to fight for me and to use me to try and inspire them to a win." And sure enough, in the second half, Notre Dame came fired up and went out to win the football game 12-6 and to defeat Army and have an over 500 season. Now that I've told you about Knute Rockne's background, the setting, and the purpose of this speech, I'm going to conclude this speech. We can learn from Knute that inspiration isn't something to be contemplated, but inspiration is something to be said. And when you're needed for inspiration, you can't just think about it, you have to step out and do it. And that's what Knute Rockne did. He was not a prepared speaker, he was not in any way ready to give what he had to give, but he did it because that's what his team needed. So when you're needed for inspiration, you just have to step out and do it and speak to people even when you're not ready, kind of like what I'm doing right now. Thank you.